The sun glinted off the water like shards of glass as Elena adjusted her diving mask, the salty breeze tugging at her dark hair. The small boat rocked gently beneath her, cutting through the crystalline waves of the Caribbean. She could feel her pulse quicken not from fear, but from anticipation. Today wasn't just any dive. Today, she and Marco were chasing a legend, the sunken ship La Sirena, lost for centuries and whispered about in hushed tones among treasure hunters. Marco, with his usual easy confidence, leaned over the side of the boat, checking the coordinates on his handheld GPS. "We're right on top of it," he said, eyes sparkling with excitement. His voice carried that familiar mixture of certainty and thrill that always seemed to stir something deep inside her. "Ready?" Elena nodded, gripping the edge of the boat. "Ready." The water swallowed her in an instant, cold and enveloping, yet oddly comforting. She adjusted her fins and kicked downward, feeling the ocean's weight as the sunlight faded into an ethereal blue. Marco descended beside her, their bubbles mingling as they moved together, silent companions in this hidden world. Then, through the haze of sand and shadow, she saw it, the skeletal remains of a ship, half buried in coral and seaweed, looming like a forgotten monument. Her heart skipped a beat. The carvings along the hull were intricate, worn by time, yet beautiful in their decay. It was surreal, almost dreamlike, to see history frozen in place beneath the waves. "Unbelievable," Marco whispered, brushing a hand along the ship's side. His touch, even through the neoprene of his glove, sent an unexpected shiver through her. She tried to focus, reminding herself why they were here. Treasure. History. Discovery. But beneath the professional veneer, there was an undeniable electricity, the kind that made her pulse quicken in tandem with the ocean's rhythm. Elena swam closer, her flashlight cutting through the murky water, illuminating the wreck. Broken masts jutted upward, barnacles clinging to every surface, and the open cargo hold beckoned like a cavern of secrets. She felt a thrill of danger. The wreck was beautiful, but it was fragile, holding its secrets tightly within the rusted ribs of its hull. As they explored, Marco signaled toward a section of the deck that looked unusual. A hatch, almost completely hidden beneath layers of coral, was slightly ajar. Elena's stomach fluttered not from fear, but from curiosity. Who had left it open, and why? She pried the hatch open carefully, revealing a narrow ladder leading down into darkness. The beam of her flashlight danced over the edges, revealing crates sealed with ancient rope. "Looks like someone or something was trying to hide something," she murmured, her voice barely audible even in the water. Marco grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Shall we find out what?" Elena felt a thrill that was more than just excitement over discovery. There was an intimacy in this shared moment, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they were courting together. Every brush of his fin against hers sent tiny sparks along her skin. She shook her head, scolding herself, but the sensation lingered, mixing dangerously with the rush of the dive. Descending into the cargo hold, the water grew colder, darker. The crates were heavy with mystery. Elena's hands traced the worn wood as she examined them, fingers brushing against damp rope and corroded locks. Each crate seemed to hum with the promise of stories long forgotten. Suddenly, one of the crates shifted slightly, revealing the glint of something metallic. Her heart skipped a beat. Treasure. Artifacts. Or something else entirely. Marco's hand touched hers as they both reached for it, and for a brief second, the world outside the sunken ship ceased to exist. Only the cold, silent water, the looming mystery of La Sirena, and the undeniable tension between them remained. Elena swallowed hard, fighting the dual pull of curiosity and something far more primal, something she couldn't yet name. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the sunken ship, she realized, they would uncover them together, but at what cost? The ocean seemed to hold its breath as they pried the crate open. What they found inside would change everything. The crate creaked ominously as Elena and Marco forced it open, the corroded hinges groaning like the echoes of a ghost long forgotten. Water swirled around them, stirring up sand that clouded their vision. Through the murky haze, Elena's flashlight revealed its contents, a collection of objects, worn with age but unmistakably valuable ornate coins, fragments of gilded jewelry, and a leather-bound journal whose cover was cracked and soaked but intact. Marco's eyes lit up. This is incredible," he murmured, brushing a gloved hand over the journal. "I've read about ships like this, but to actually find one, it's unbelievable." Elena leaned closer, brushing her fingers across the surface. The journal's leather smelled faintly of salt and decay. She hesitated, a shiver running down her spine as if touching it bridged centuries of silence. Carefully, she opened it, the water pressing against the pages, revealing spidery handwriting that seemed almost alive beneath the dim glow of their flashlights. "Look at this," she whispered, tracing a passage. "It's a log. The captain's notes, I think. Something about a hidden chamber, and a secret worth guarding at all costs." Marco leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body through the wetsuits. The proximity made her heart pound in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the ocean currents. He tapped the page with his finger. "If we can find this chamber, we might be the first to see it in centuries." Elena swallowed hard, trying to focus on the mission rather than the sudden, undeniable tension radiating between them. "We need to be careful. The ship isn't stable." One wrong move, she didn't finish her sentence. A groan of stressed metal interrupted them as a section of the deck shifted. Marco grabbed her arm, steadying her against the uneven planks. Their eyes met, an unspoken agreement passing between them, danger and desire intertwined in ways neither could ignore. "Let's move," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "We'll take it slow, stick together." They swam deeper into the ship, the cargo hold giving way to narrow passageways lined with the skeletons of broken crates and twisted metal. The water felt colder here, heavier, as though the ship itself were pressing down on them, guarding its secrets. Elena's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing faded carvings on the walls, symbols she didn't recognize, but that somehow felt ominous. At the far end, they found a door reinforced with rusted iron. The journal had mentioned a hidden chamber, and this had to be it. Marco signaled for her to stand back, then pushed against the door. It resisted, but with a concerted effort, it slowly gave way, revealing a small room filled with treasures far beyond their imagination, chests overflowing with gold coins, silver goblets encrusted with jewels, and a velvet-lined chest that seemed untouched by time. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "It's magnificent," she breathed, reaching for a golden chalice. The metal was warm in her gloved hand, almost pulsing with a strange energy. Marco moved closer behind her, his hand brushing hers as they examined the treasure. The contact was brief, fleeting, but it sent a jolt through her, and she knew he had felt it too. "I've never seen anything like this," he whispered, his voice low, intimate. "We're the first to touch this in hundreds of years. It's electrifying." Elena's heart raced, part from the discovery, part from the closeness, part from the unspoken tension. They worked side by side, examining the treasures, carefully moving artifacts into safer positions. Every glance, Every touch was charged with a silent electricity, the danger of the sunken ship amplifying feelings they could no longer deny. Then, something caught Elena's eye, a small, intricately carved box tucked in a shadowed corner. It was almost imperceptible, hidden beneath a pile of sand-encrusted fabrics. She reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside, a single object gleamed, a pendant, shaped like a sea serpent, its eyes tiny rubies that seemed to glow in the dim light. Marco leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Be careful with that," he murmured. "Legends say it's cursed, or at least, fiercely protected." Elena met his gaze, the mixture of thrill and warning in his eyes only heightening her own desire for discovery and perhaps, for him. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted the pendant from its resting place, feeling the weight of centuries in her hand, and a thrill ran through her that had nothing to do with treasure. The ocean around them seemed to hold its breath. The La Sirena had kept its secrets for centuries, and now, Elena and Marco were standing at the threshold of something far greater than gold, something dangerous, irresistible, and profoundly intimate. Elena held the pendant delicately, the ruby eyes catching the flicker of her flashlight like tiny flames beneath the water. Marco's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, and she felt a flush creep across her neck, even through the cool blue of the ocean. The currents swirled gently around them, but in that confined space of the hidden chamber, the water seemed to hum with anticipation. "Let's keep moving," Marco said, his voice low and calm, though she caught a sharp edge of something unspoken. He gestured toward a narrow passage that twisted further into the ship's belly. The journal had hinted that the captain had a private cabin possibly containing the ship's most prized secrets. Elena nodded, slipping the pendant into her pocket, careful not to disturb its eerie glow. "After you," she said, her voice slightly breathless. The closeness of Marco, the shared thrill of discovery, and the subtle thrill of the unknown made her pulse quicken. They swam side by side through the twisting corridors, careful to avoid the sharp edges of broken beams and rusted metal. The light from their flashlights cut through the darkness in narrow beams, illuminating the once grand furnishings now covered in silt and algae. Every creak of the ship seemed amplified, as if the La Sirena were alive, watching them intrude on its secrets. As they approached the captain's cabin, a faint glimmer caught Elena's eye. She reached out, brushing aside a veil of kelp, and revealed a small, sealed chest. Her heart thumped. The journal had spoken of a chamber within a chamber, a final secret the captain had gone to great lengths to hide. Marco hovered beside her, his hand brushing hers as they worked together to lift the chest. The contact was brief, but the warmth lingered, sending a ripple of something deeper through her. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low enough to make her shiver. "This one feels different." Elena opened the chest slowly, and her breath caught. Inside were letters, meticulously folded, ink-faded but legible. But what drew her attention immediately were the personal belongings, a gold locket, a small vial of perfume, and a delicate silk scarf, preserved despite centuries underwater. It was intimate, almost scandalous, and Elena felt a thrill that had nothing to do with treasure. Marco leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers, the heat of their shared effort palpable even in the cold water. "It's personal," he murmured. "Like the captain left a piece of himself behind." She nodded, holding the locket delicately. The image inside, a woman with eyes like fire, made her stomach twist. He wanted someone to remember him, or maybe someone to find this. Her fingers lingered on the gold, tracing the fine engravings. For a moment, the treasure, the ship, even the ocean around them faded. It was just Elena and Marco, the unspoken tension between them crackling in the still, murky water. The proximity, the shared exhilaration, the danger, it all combined into something electric, impossible to ignore. Then Marco's hand brushed hers again, lingering just slightly too long. Elena's pulse raced, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the water. She glanced at him, eyes wide, and caught a fleeting smirk that told her he felt the same. But there was no time to dwell. A sudden groan echoed through the ship, followed by a cascade of sand and debris. One of the nearby beams had shifted, knocking loose a section of the ceiling above them. Elena grabbed Marco's arm instinctively, their hands tangling as the debris rained down. "Hold on!" Marco shouted, pulling her behind a fallen section of the deck. Water churned around them, sand clouding the space, making visibility nearly zero. Their bodies pressed together, the collision sending sparks of awareness through both of them. When the debris settled, they were both breathing heavily, eyes locked. The danger, the rush, the shared thrill of near disaster, everything had amplified the tension between them. Marco reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and Elena didn't move away. Not entirely. "I didn't mean," he started, then paused, eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "You didn't," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible in the water. She could feel his proximity, the heat of his body even through their suits. Her own pulse hammered in her ears, an unspoken acknowledgement of the desire growing between them. But even as the moment hung between them, they knew the ship still held secrets. The captain's cabin was just the beginning. The journal hinted at a final chamber, a place no one had touched for centuries, rumored to hold the heart of the La Sirena's mystery. They exchanged a glance, one filled with mutual understanding. Adventure, danger, desire, they were all entwined now, and neither could ignore the pull. Slowly, deliberately, they turned back toward the ship's inner corridors, hands brushing occasionally, the electricity of the near touch lingering in the water around them. Somewhere deeper in the ship, the final secret waited. And Elena had the growing, undeniable sense that uncovering it would be nothing like she expected. The narrow corridor twisted like the spine of some colossal sea creature, the walls slick with algae and the echoes of centuries pressing down on them. Elena's heartbeat matched the rhythm of her fins as she followed Marco, their movements cautious, deliberate. Every creak of the ship sounded like a warning, every shadow seemed alive. "This has to be it," Marco whispered, pointing to a reinforced door at the far end. The journal had mentioned a private vault, one that supposedly contained the captain's most treasured possession. Elena swallowed hard, the anticipation mixing with a nervous flutter in her stomach. It wasn't just the discovery that thrilled her, it was the proximity of Marco, the tension in the shared danger, the heat that lingered under her wetsuit despite the icy water. Together, they pushed the door. Rusted hinges protested, but with a concerted effort, it swung open, revealing a small chamber bathed in dim, filtered light from cracks in the ship's hull. In the center of the room, atop a pedestal of coral-encrusted wood, rested a chest unlike any they had seen. Its surface was carved with intricate sea serpent motifs, echoing the pendant Elena had found earlier. Marco's eyes darkened with awe. This is it," he murmured, reaching out but not touching it. There was reverence in his tone, a recognition that some treasures weren't just objects, they were legacies. Elena stepped closer, the water rippling around her. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before placing her hands on the chest. A shiver ran through her, not from cold, but from the electricity of the moment. Her eyes met Marco's, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, suspended in the watery silence. "Careful," Marco said softly, his hand brushing hers as if to guide, to steady. The contact was fleeting, but enough to ignite something deeper, a tension that neither of them could ignore. She felt her pulse quicken, and a heat that had nothing to do with the water spread through her. Together, they pried the chest open, and Elena gasped. Inside lay an assortment of objects, gold doubloons, strings of pearls, and scrolls inscribed with a language long forgotten. But it wasn't the treasure that drew her attention, it was a small, sealed envelope, its wax emblem a serpent curling around a crown. Marco reached for it, but Elena's hand shot out first, holding it delicately. "The captain's final secret," she whispered, a tremor in her voice that had nothing to do with the chill. He leaned closer, their faces inches apart in the narrow space. The water around them seemed to thrum, carrying the tension that crackled between them. "Shall we see what it says?" he asked, voice low, intimate. Elena nodded, carefully breaking the seal. The paper inside was surprisingly intact, though damp. The captain's handwriting was elegant, almost lyrical, describing a betrayal by someone aboard, and a treasure hidden not just for wealth, but for love, vengeance, and redemption. The final lines hinted at a map, one that would lead to something even greater than gold. Her breath caught. This isn't just treasure. It's a story. A life preserved here, waiting for someone to uncover it. Marco's hand brushed hers again as they examined the scroll. The contact lingered, electric, sending a thrill through her that made her stomach flutter and her chest tighten. "And I think we're that someone," he murmured, eyes locked on hers. There was danger, excitement, and something far more intimate in his gaze, a shared awareness of desire, of the chemistry that had been building since the first dive. Elena's fingers trembled slightly as she rolled the scroll back into the envelope. "We need to find the map," she said, trying to steady her voice, though the sound came out huskier than intended. Every instinct told her that the deeper they went, the more perilous the ship would become, but also, that the bond forming between them could no longer be ignored. A sudden groan echoed through the hull, and sand cascaded from a distant ceiling beam. Marco instinctively pressed closer to her, his arm brushing her side, and Elena felt her breath hitch. They exchanged a glance, the tension electric, before turning back to the chest. The ship seemed to pulse around them, as if aware that its secrets were being unveiled. "Stay close," Marco said, his voice a whisper in her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "We don't know what's ahead." Elena nodded, heart pounding, both from the thrill of the unknown and the closeness of him. Together, they swam deeper into the captain's quarters, toward the final chamber hinted at in the journal. Danger awaited, yes, but so did revelation, and perhaps, something even more irresistible. The sunken ship held its breath as they pressed forward, and somewhere in its depths, the true secret of La Sirena waited to be discovered. The corridors of the La Sirena felt narrower now, as if the ship itself were closing in around them. The water pressed coldly against their wetsuits, but it was nothing compared to the tightening knot of tension in Elena's chest. Every creak of metal, every shifting shadow made her heart jump, but she wasn't just afraid of the wreck. She was afraid of what she felt every time Marco brushed against her, every time their hands met over the glinting treasures or the fragile scrolls. "Keep your light steady," Marco whispered, swimming slightly ahead. His voice was calm, almost commanding, yet there was a tremor of excitement underneath it, a thrill that mirrored her own. She followed, careful not to look away from the narrow path he illuminated, yet acutely aware of the heat radiating from him even through the wetsuit. They turned a corner, and the ship shuddered beneath them. A sudden collapse sent a cascade of sand and debris swirling through the water. Elena gasped and instinctively reached for Marco. Their hands tangled in the murky current, a spark of shock running through her as their fingers gripped each other's tightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his face close to hers in the dim light. The proximity made her pulse hammer, not from fear, but from the magnetic pull that had been building since the dive began. Yes," she managed to breathe, even as her heart raced. His eyes held hers for a long moment, dark and intense, and she could feel the electricity crackling between them. "Let's keep going," she whispered, her voice slightly husky. Deeper into the ship, the corridors became treacherous. Broken beams, jagged metal, and unstable flooring forced them to move cautiously. The journal had mentioned a secret vault at the ship's very heart, but the path to it was perilous, and the water seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if warning them to turn back. Elena's hand brushed a loose plank, and it shifted with a groan. She froze, glancing at Marco, who reached out instinctively, his hand resting on her arm. The simple touch made her shiver, a sensation unrelated to the cold. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to forget the danger, to focus only on the heat between them, the shared exhilaration of this forbidden closeness. "Just a little further," he murmured, guiding her through a narrow opening that led into a larger chamber. The water here was dark and still, the silence almost sacred. And there, in the center, partially obscured by silt and coral, was the final chest, larger and more ornate than anything they had seen. Its carvings depicted a sea serpent coiling around a crown, echoing the pendant she still wore close to her chest. Elena's breath caught. "This must be it," she whispered. She swam closer, heart racing, aware that Marco's presence behind her amplified every sensation. He hovered near her, close enough that the warmth of his body brushed hers. "Be careful," he said softly, eyes dark with something that made her pulse stutter. The danger of the chest was clear, but the danger of the moment of being so near him was far more intoxicating. Together, they pried the chest open. Inside lay treasures of unimaginable value, but Elena's gaze was drawn to a small, sealed compartment within. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it, revealing a bundle of letters, maps, and a small, velvet-wrapped object. She held it delicately, the weight of centuries pressing in. Marco reached for her hand, covering hers with his. The contact was electric. "Are you sure you want to open it?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper meant only for her. Elena looked up at him, their faces inches apart, and the world seemed to shrink to the confines of the chamber. "I want to," she admitted, though her voice quivered with more than anticipation of the discovery. As she unwrapped the velvet, Marco leaned slightly closer, and she felt the heat of his chest against her back. The sensation was dizzying, distracting her from the treasure in her hands. Her fingers brushed against his, lingering, and she realized that whatever lay in the chest, gold, secrets, or curses, was no longer the only thing that mattered. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, sending a cloud of silt and debris into the water. Elena and Marco instinctively clutched each other, bodies pressed together as the chamber groaned around them. The danger was immediate, real, but so was the undeniable pull between them. When the chaos settled, their faces were close, breaths mingling in the water, hearts racing in tandem. Neither spoke, both aware that something had shifted irreversibly. The treasure, the danger, the secrets, they were no longer alone in this sunken world. Elena swallowed hard, eyes locking with Marco's. "We need to get out, but I don't want to let go," she admitted, voice barely audible, and the confession hung in the water like a fragile thread. Marco's hand found hers again, firm, reassuring. "Then we hold on," he murmured, and for a moment, the sunken ship was not just a tomb of secrets, but a vessel carrying the spark of something neither had expected, and neither could deny. The water around them was thick with silt, the remnants of the ship's earlier groan swirling in slow-motion clouds. Elena's heartbeat pounded in her chest, a rhythm that matched Marco's beside her. Every nerve in her body seemed electrified, heightened by the peril and by his proximity. She couldn't deny it any longer. The tension between them was palpable, dangerous, and intoxicating. Marco reached out, brushing a hand over her arm to steady her as she navigated a narrow passage. The contact was brief, but it left a trail of fire along her skin, a jolt she couldn't ignore. She met his gaze, and for a suspended moment, the treasure, the ship, and even the ocean around them ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, suspended in water and tension, breathless in every sense. "We have to finish this," Marco whispered, his voice low and intimate, vibrating in the confined chamber. "The captain's secret, it's just ahead. But we need to be careful. The ship, it's unstable." Elena swallowed, her pulse hammering. "I know. I can't stop thinking about how close we've been. Every touch, every brush, it's driving me crazy." Her words, though whispered, carried the weight of months of danger, of shared adventures, of unspoken desire finally surfacing. Marco's eyes darkened, and he closed the distance between them, just a fraction, just enough to let her feel the heat radiating off his body. "Neither can I," he admitted. His gloved fingers brushed against hers again, lingering this time, tracing the line of her hand. The water around them seemed to pulse in response, charged with an energy far older than the ship itself. They pressed forward, moving through the last corridor that led to the captain's inner sanctum. The walls were narrower now, the water heavier, colder. Every step was a negotiation with the ship, every breath measured against the thrill and the danger. Elena's hand found the hilt of a rusted latch as they entered a room that seemed almost untouched by time. In the center stood a pedestal carved in the shape of a coiled sea serpent, the chest resting atop it gleaming with a metallic sheen that shimmered even in the dim light. Elena's heart skipped. The pendant she carried seemed to hum in response, tiny vibrations against her chest. She lifted the lid, and inside lay the final secret, a bundle of letters, a small velvet pouch, and a jeweled dagger, its ruby eyes matching those of the pendant. Marco hovered beside her, hand brushing hers as they reached for the pouch together. The contact lingered longer than it should have, the charged intimacy of shared discovery mingling with the simmering desire between them. Elena opened the pouch, revealing a map, ancient and fragile, depicting not only treasures but locations marked with cryptic symbols. This is beyond anything I imagined," she breathed. "It's more than gold, it's a guide to the captain's legacy, his hidden life." Marco's hand found hers again, fingers entwining. The simple act sent waves of heat through her, a connection as intense as the danger surrounding them. "We did it," he whispered, voice low, a mix of triumph and something else, something more personal. Elena glanced at him, heart hammering in her chest. "We did, but I can't stop thinking about us, about this." The words hung between them, fragile yet impossible to ignore. The ship groaned, a reminder that they were still underwater, still vulnerable, still at the mercy of centuries of decay. And yet, the moment stretched, elongated by the thrill of danger and the pull of desire. Marco leaned closer, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, fingertips lingering on her cheek. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the two of them, the treasure, the ship, the ocean all faded. Elena's breath caught as their faces hovered mere inches apart. Then, as if pulled by gravity stronger than the water itself, Marco's lips brushed against hers in a fleeting, electric kiss. The shock of it made her tremble, but the intensity, the hunger, and the unspoken need ignited something deep within her. She responded instinctively, hands finding his shoulders, pressing closer, their bodies aligned in the weightless suspension of the water. It was a kiss that spoke of months of tension, danger, shared secrets, and desire finally breaking free. The ship groaned again, a reminder that reality awaited, but neither moved away immediately. They were caught in the moment, suspended between danger and longing, the hidden secrets of the La Sirena surrounding them like silent witnesses. Finally, Elena broke the kiss, breathless, heart racing. We should get out of here before something collapses, she said, though the heat in her chest lingered. Marco nodded, but his eyes held hers, dark with unspoken promise. Yes, but this isn't over, he murmured. Not by a long shot. As they turned to navigate the ship back toward the surface, their hands remained intertwined, the unspoken electricity between them unbroken. The treasure was found, the secrets unveiled, but the deeper, more dangerous discovery was the one they had made about each other. The ascent was tense. Every kick of their fins stirred centuries of silt, clouding the water and making the way back to the surface treacherous. The La Sirena groaned behind them, its timbers protesting centuries of neglect, as if warning them to leave before claiming its next victim. Elena's hand found Marco's again, their fingers intertwining instinctively, grounding each other against the suffocating pressure of the ocean. I don't like this, she admitted, her voice muffled by the regulator but carrying an unmistakable edge of fear. The ship, it feels like it's alive. Like it knows we're taking its secrets. Marco's eyes met hers, dark and steady. Then we leave together, he said firmly. The intimacy in his gaze sent shivers down her spine. In the dim glow of their flashlights, it was more than an adventure, it was a promise. The corridors seemed narrower on the way back, the wrecked beams and jagged metal more menacing in the clouded water. A sudden collapse sent a shower of debris spiraling toward them. Elena reacted instinctively, pulling Marco closer as the fragments passed. Their bodies pressed together, the surge of adrenaline intensifying the heat between them. When the chaos settled, they were both breathless, partly from exertion, partly from the closeness of the moment. Elena's hand lingered on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart through the wetsuit. We survived, she whispered, her voice trembling in more ways than one. Barely, Marco murmured, his lips brushing the top of her mask in a fleeting, weightless kiss. But we did, and we have everything we came for. She glanced at the treasures, the pendant, the map, the captain's letters, all cradled carefully in waterproof pouches. It was more than gold, it was history, a story preserved beneath the waves. But for Elena, the true discovery had been far more immediate and unforgettable, Marco. They reached the main hold and carefully navigated toward the exit hatch. The sunlight filtering through the water above felt like a promise, a beacon after the oppressive, shadowed labyrinth of the ship. Elena kicked harder, Marco matching her pace, the current pulling them upward as if urging them toward the world above. At last, the surface broke, sunlight scattering across their goggles and wetsuits. They gasped, removing their regulators, coughing and laughing in equal measure. The boat rocked gently beneath them, the world suddenly bright and real, yet still tinged with the thrill of the depths they had just escaped. Marco helped Elena onto the boat first, his hands firm and steady. She felt every brush of his fingers, every flicker of heat, and the awareness of his presence left her breathless. As he climbed aboard after her, their eyes met again, long, lingering, unashamed. "We made it," she said, though her voice betrayed the tremor of excitement, relief, and something far more personal. "Yes," Marco replied, stepping closer. His hand found hers, holding it as if neither wanted to let go. "And we didn't just find the ship's secrets. We found something else." Elena felt her pulse quicken, remembering the weightless kiss in the captain's chamber, the spark that had ignited in the perilous heart of the ship. She smiled, a mischievous, knowing smile. "We did. And I don't think either of us will forget it." The pendant she had found glinted in the sunlight, a tiny, ruby-eyed reminder of everything they had uncovered, both in the depths of the ocean and in each other. Marco's fingers brushed against it, then lingered over hers, warm and insistent. "Shall we see where the rest of the map leads?" he asked, a playful edge in his voice that made her heart leap. Elena laughed softly, leaning closer, feeling the warmth of him against her. "I think we should, but only together." The boat rocked gently beneath them, the Caribbean sun casting glittering light across the waves. The La Sirena lay silent beneath the water, its secrets now partially revealed, but the bond formed in its shadow was something no centuries-old ship could bury. Marco pulled her close, and this time, the kiss was unhurried, deliberate, filled with the weight of shared danger, triumph, and desire. It was the culmination of tension built over hours beneath the sea, a release that left them both trembling, laughing, and breathless. As they pulled back, foreheads resting together, Elena felt a thrill deeper than any treasure could offer. "So," she whispered, "what's our next adventure?" Marco smiled, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Wherever the map and we decide to go next." The sun sparkled on the water around them, the waves whispering promises of secrets yet to uncover, of dangers to face, and of passions that had been awakened beneath the sunken ship. Together, Elena and Marco had not only uncovered a legend, they had found something far more enduring, each other. And beneath the endless blue, the La Sirena waited, silent, mysterious, and still holding the remainder of its secrets, just as the ocean held the memory of the fire they had ignited beneath its depths.